what I was getting at was that there are some structures that I can, or visual aids that I can use to help me organize this column of text. And one of them is to create or activate the grid. And then if I'm going to use the grid, I want to use snap to grid, so the boxes snap to it automatically, and it's just cleaner, it's more efficient. Now, another thing that I might want to add to my document are a margin. So by default, Illustrator does not create margins for your document. And there is a margin minimum. There is a margin minimum. That margins should not be smaller than this. But there's always exceptions to the rule. So we create rules, and then there's scenarios where you might work on something and the margin has to be something else. Now, when we talk about a minimum, this is the smallest. So you could have larger margins, or maybe there's a publication where for whatever reason, the margin has to get smaller. But in general, this is best practice. The margins should always be set to 1/4 of an inch. That's 0.25, right? So I'm going to draw some guides in this document that are going to describe the margins for me. And I'm going to go to my guides and set it to 1/4 of an inch. So right here in my ruler, this is a half, so halfway there is 1/4 of an inch. So let me draw another guide, set it 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to move over here. I'm going to draw another guide, set it 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to go down here. Where is it? Go down here and set the guide again to 1/4 of an inch. So now I have guides around my document that are describing the margin. Does that make sense? Okay, now I'm going to create another device that's referred to as a gutter. Okay, now a gutter is the space between two columns of text, or any number of columns of text. If I had a 3-column document, there would be 2 gutters between the set of 3 columns. In this case, because it's 2 columns, there's 1 gutter. So this is where the gutter would live. Right now, to create the gutter, and let's say I want the columns to be the exact same size, because you can make columns of text where one column is wider than the other. You can make an asymmetrical layout, but let's say I want to make a symmetrical layout. I want them to be exactly the same, the columns, that is. I need to find the center point of my document first. So this is an 8.5 by 11 document. So that means the center point would be 4 1/4, which is right there. And now that I know the center, I can put margins on either, or excuse me, put guides on either side of this to construct a gutter. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to put a guide here, and I'm going to put a guide there. So there's 2 little boxes. I know that each one of these are 1/8 of an inch. So together, they're 1/4 of an inch. So now I have a structure in my document that shows me, zoom in here, that shows me a left margin, a right margin, and a center margin that we call a gutter. So now when I create my boxes, let me change the color of this bounding box to something that you guys can see better. Now when I construct my text boxes, I can use these margins as well to help guide me in terms of constructing the width of these columns with more accuracy. All right, so now I have a column of text that snaps to this margin structure that I created with guides. So you see that? See how it snaps to it? Okay, so see there's a margin here. There's a margin here. And then I created some guides that create my gutter. And you'll notice that the box, the text box, is not only using the grid structure, but it's also using the margins and guides that I constructed. So what I'm getting at is that to work with and construct a really meticulous document, there are probably 2 features that you want to design with to assist you in being meticulous. Guides, which create margins, and the grid in the background to help you snap the boxes in increments that are logical. 1/8 of an inch increments or 1/16 of an inch increments. We basically got to a point where I was able to show you that we can use grids to help us construct our document. We can use guides to create a structure through margins and columns to set our text and make sure our boxes are aligned to it. We also learned that it's more efficient and easier to read text if it's in columns, multiple columns rather than one giant box. It also fits better. And then we also learned that we can set text that's overset from this box. This little red box at the bottom indicates that there's some text that we're not seeing. If I click on that, the software will load it for me and allow me to create a new text box with it. Oh, look, there's still overset text. There's still a little bit there. So if I click on it again, it should allow me to create a third text box. All right, so as you can see, there's a lot to this. It's not hard, but there's a lot sort of to this to start setting text. But you practice it a couple of times and it'll become second nature. You'll be really quick and efficient with it. Once again, Illustrator is a little bit more difficult. When we jump to InDesign, you can create margins like in 2 seconds because it's a feature in the software. Here it's not. I have to build them by hand.